I want to now discuss some key option settings that you can establish even before you start building your plan to set up some good defaults. And one of the things I wanted to talk about was understanding manually scheduled tasks versus automatic scheduled tasks. Also wanted to talk about default task types now and revisit this again when we get into assigning resources. And basically think about scheduling from a duration standpoint or a work standpoint. And if you are estimating from a duration standpoint, for example, you can say that this task will be 10 days. No matter how many resources I assign to that task, the duration stays fixed. You can also have duration change based on your resource assignments. So, for example, if you choose fixed work and say, hey, this task is going to require 80 hours of work, and as you assign more resources, the duration will get smaller and smaller and smaller, or fluctuate based on your resource assignment level. So, work is really the amount of effort going into that task, and duration is really the difference between the start and finish date based on the calendar you have assigned to that project and task. There's also units, and Microsoft Project takes that into account as well. And units is all about the percent allocation of a resource. For example, you can be assigned 100% of your time to work on a 10-day task, and therefore you'll end up doing 10 days of work or 80 hours of work, given that there's 8 hours a day. And we'll be talking about how that's calculated when we talk about calendar settings next. So project uses this formula, work equals duration times units, and you fix one of those. So if you fix duration and you change units, then work will change. If you fix duration and you change work, then units will change. If you fix work, as you assign more resources, duration will get calculated and recalculated based on the level of assignment. If you fix units and you change duration, work will get recalculated. If you change work, then duration will get recalculated. And we have a whole section that we'll spend time, and you'll see how this behaves, the schedule equation behaves, if you will, once we start assigning resources to tasks. But you can set up the default in the beginning. Then there'll be some other key option settings that I'm going to want to look at as well. So let's go have a look at project. Under the file tab, you'll notice that I can click on options, and there's the general option settings, and you can change your default date format here as well, which might be useful for you. You have the display, and you can add the entry bar. If you want to add that to your view, you can. There's also the schedule, and under the schedule, there's some things in here. We'll talk about these calendar settings in the next section, but I wanted to show scheduling options for this. And here we can see that new tasks created are manually scheduled tasks, and we're going to talk about this. This is really all about some new functionality that was introduced in Project 2010 and elaborated in 2013. And this gives you the flexibility for the very first time to enter in duration, start, and finish dates any way that you want, including entering in text. It also allows you to enter in estimates at the summary task level and compare that to the details that you put below. So there's some really good advantages to using manually scheduled tasks, and you can see that as we start building our plan in the upcoming sections. Auto scheduled is the way that you want project to calculate your start and finish date based on certain key factors like the project start date, like the dependencies you have, the duration estimates you have for those tasks, like the calendars associated with that, and the resource assignments. So think of project as a scheduling tool, and it wants to calculate your start and finish dates for you based on how you put that schedule together. And that's ultimately where we want to get to, but there will be some useful functionality for manually scheduled tasks, which we'll talk about. But you can set this default up right from the beginning. So for example, I'm going to choose auto schedule as my default for new tasks. The other thing you can do from here is decide what type of default task type you have. And this is again for new tasks that you're adding. And you can always change this on a task by task basis. Same thing with manually versus auto. One task can be manually scheduled and another task can be auto scheduled. Just like your default task type here, one task can be fixed duration and another one can be fixed work and another one can be fixed units. Now fixed units is the default, but you can choose fixed duration for all new tasks. And this simply means that as you estimate your duration, it will stay that way until you manually change it. But you can still load up your resources and calculate work and do all that kind of stuff. And then you have a secondary option to decide whether you want your task to be effort driven or not. And that can be turned on or off. Now, in Microsoft Project, effort driven is in effect synonymous with the word work. So when you choose fixed work, Notice that effort driven gets automatically checked off and is grayed out because work is effort driven. And that means you're scheduling from an effort standpoint, and as you assign more resources or take away resources, the duration will continue to fluctuate. So fixed work and effort are synonymous, but I could in effect choose fixed duration and select effort driven, which means that I want my duration to stay fixed, but as I adjust my duration, do I want my work estimates to stay fixed, or do I want them to adjust along with it? And again, we'll see how this behaves once we start using the tool. So these are some key option settings that you can establish even before you start building your plan. There's also something for proofing. You have a save function here, so you might want to save auto save every 10 or 15 minutes. Some preferences around language, some advanced. You can even customize your ribbon here and your quick access toolbar if you want to add things to the quick access toolbar, and I'll show you how to do that another way going forward as well, because you can add any one of those functions or commands to your quick access toolbar, and you'll see that I've already added some that aren't part of the default. For example, zoom entire project, update tasks, scroll to task, and show outline, and that's kind of useful for me because I use those a lot and I don't want to have to remember where they are underneath each tab. So there's some nice built-in functionality here into the options, but I really wanted to point out there are some key option settings that you need to be aware of, and whether you want your new task created to be auto-scheduled or manually scheduled, or what your default task type is. Now there are other things in here that will become useful and we'll come back and visit throughout the rest of this course.